Gentlemen, tonight I'll tell you a story about trust broken, about betrayal that cuts deeper than any blade, and about a man who chose justice over rage. Daniel Harris was an ordinary husband and father, the kind of man who carried his family's burdens without complaint. One evening, while paying bills on his wife's laptop, something unusual caught his eye. The username field was already filled in. So was the password. At first, he thought it was nothing, just a saved login. But curiosity tugged at him. With one click, a different inbox appeared at the top corner. His wife's name, at the bottom. A string of messages. He scrolled. Flirty texts. Late-night whispers. Plans for a weekend at a hotel. And a man's name, Victor. Daniel's stomach dropped. His chest tightened. In that instant, the world he thought was secure shattered into pieces. Daniel's finger hovered over the trackpad, his pulse pounding as the inbox unfolded in front of him. Each message was a cut, deeper than the last. Photos playful, suggestive, intimate in ways no husband should ever witness. Words written with a tenderness that was once his alone. Yesterday was unforgettable. When you held me, I felt like I was exactly where I wanted to be. And then the dagger. Can't wait for the weekend. Does that hotel near the lake still take last-minute reservations? For a moment, Daniel couldn't breathe. It felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room. His vision blurred. His mind refused to process what his eyes confirmed. Numbness washed over him like ice water. He scrolled again and again, hoping the words might change, hoping it was some cruel misunderstanding. But there was no mistake. Every line was a confession, in plain sight. The silence around him was deafening. He pushed back from the table and walked down the hall. His son, Michael 17, was asleep, headphones slipping from his ears, chest rising and falling with the rhythm of a boy still dreaming, safe dreams. His daughter, Emily, just 14, sat at her desk, textbooks open, quietly scribbling notes for a test she wanted to ace. They were the reflection of everything Daniel had poured himself into. The very reason he worked long hours. Why he bit his tongue when life pressed too hard. And now, the foundation beneath it all was cracking. He leaned against the doorframe, watching them. And that's when the questions hit him, not about her, but about himself. Had I failed? Was I blind? Did I become so consumed with routine, with responsibility, that I forgot how to be the man she wanted? Doubt poisoned his thoughts. Mixing with the pain, he thought about the anniversaries, the family vacations, the whispered promises in the dark. Were they all lies, or had they been real once, only to die quietly while he wasn't looking? Daniel returned to the kitchen. But the house no longer felt like his. The bed he shared with Melissa mocked him with its neatly arranged pillows. The family photos on the wall stared back at him, smiles frozen in a happiness that no longer existed. He sat in the quiet, staring at the clock as if it might rewind time, as if he could go back to a moment before the inbox, before the name Victor became a shadow in his marriage. All night, he wrestled with a decision. Should he confront her now? Drag the truth into the light? Demand answers? Or should he keep it buried? At least until he knew what to do for the sake of his children. One choice promised chaos. The other promised torment, and neither offered peace. As dawn crept through the blinds, one thing was certain. Daniel Harris was no longer the man he had been the night before. He stood at a crossroads, tell her, or stay silent, and either path would change his life forever. The next morning, Daniel rose early, his body moving on autopilot, though his mind hadn't rested at all. He fried eggs, poured coffee, sliced fruit for Emily's lunchbox. To anyone watching, it looked like any other day in the Harris household. But inside him, nothing was the same. Every sound, every glance, every silence now carried weight. Melissa walked into the kitchen, cheerful, hair styled with more care than usual. She wore a shade of lipstick he hadn't seen before, a dress that hugged her figure in ways she rarely bothered with, and a fragrance that filled the room sweet, expensive, foreign and buying. Daniel noticed it all. He said nothing. Instead, he asked if she wanted toast. She smiled, thanked him, kissed his cheek as if the night before hadn't happened at all. He studied her with quiet suspicion, the way she held her phone closer, The way her eyes darted down to the screen whenever it buzzed. These were the signs he'd once ignored. Signs that, in his desperation to believe, he had dismissed as stress, as coincidence, as routine. Now, they were puzzle pieces falling neatly into place. At breakfast, Emily chattered about a group project at school. Michael barely looked up from his cereal, focused on football tryouts later that week. Melissa laughed at their stories, slipped her heels on, and reached for her purse. "Big meeting today," she said, casually. "Victor's presenting a new project and asked me to sit in." The name landed like a stone in Daniel's chest. She spoke it so freely, so naturally, as though Victor was nothing more than a colleague, as though his name hadn't already burned itself into Daniel's memory the night before. He nodded, pretending not to notice, pretending he didn't already know. Inside, it was a quiet explosion. He dropped the kids off at school, kissed his daughter on the forehead, and watched his son stride toward the gym. Pride should have been what he felt in that moment, but instead, there was only dread. A gnawing emptiness, as if the ground beneath them was rotting. On the drive home, Daniel's mind replayed everything. The late nights Melissa claimed she was finishing reports, the mysterious errands, the sudden gym memberships, the longer showers before work, the unexplained perfume. They weren't random anymore. They were threads in a pattern he'd refused to see. And now, stitched together, the picture was undeniable. Back at the house, Melissa's absence was heavy. He sat on the edge of the bed they had once shared, staring at the pillows aligned with neat precision. Once, they symbolized stability, comfort. Now, they mocked him with a hollow symmetry. He reached for the frame on the nightstand, an old photo of their wedding day. Her smile back then looked real, full of joy. He wondered if she smiled that same way now, sitting across from Victor, laughing at his jokes, carrying secrets that destroyed the vows made in that photograph. The tension grew with each passing hour. At dinner, she talked about work deadlines. At night, she claimed exhaustion, turning her back before he could even process a word. Every excuse now felt like a performance, every glance like a mask. And Daniel, once blind to it all, now saw everything too clearly. But he said nothing. Not yet. The betrayal was no longer a suspicion, it was a fact. And yet he played his role, day after day, keeping the house together, keeping the children's smiles intact. Inside, though, the silence was suffocating. It was the silence of a man who knew the truth, but hadn't yet decided how to wield it. Living under the same roof with Melissa had become a test of endurance, like standing in a burning house while pretending the fire wasn't there. And Daniel knew the flames would only grow hotter. The question was no longer if he would confront her, but when. The weight of silence had been pressing down on Daniel for days, crushing him with every passing hour. Each smile from Melissa felt like a performance, each excuse a line in a play she had rehearsed too well. But no matter how hard he tried to swallow the truth, it clawed at him, demanding to be spoken. That night, after the kids were in bed and the house had fallen into stillness, Daniel sat at the kitchen table. A single lamp cast a pale circle of light, and he waited. When Melissa walked in, setting her purse down with a sigh, he didn't greet her with small talk. He didn't ask about dinner or work. His voice broke the silence with a question that could never be taken back. "Do you love someone else?" Melissa froze mid-step. For a second, she tried to laugh it off, to twist it into a poorly timed joke. But the look on his face told her there was no room for theater, no script to hide behind. His eyes were steady, unflinching, demanding. He leaned forward and said the name Victor. Her breath caught. The mask slipped. She stammered. But he cut her off, reciting the messages, the photos, the hotel by the lake. With every word, her shoulders sagged lower, as though the weight of her own lies was finally too heavy to carry. And then, she confessed. Her voice trembled, and tears slid down her face. "It wasn't planned. I didn't mean for it to happen. It started with glances, with work lunches, a ride home. He made me feel alive again, like I was seen. I thought those parts of me were gone." Her words pierced deeper than the affair itself. Because she wasn't just admitting betrayal, she was saying he had been invisible. that everything he'd given was not enough. Daniel sat in silence, letting her speak. Each word was like a knife, each apology like salt on a wound that would never close. She said she still loved him, that she loved the family, that it was a mistake. But nothing in her voice could erase the images already carved into his mind. Finally, he pushed his chair back and stood. His movements were slow, deliberate, as if his body carried a weight his soul could no longer bear. He walked into the bedroom, pulled a suitcase from the closet, and began to pack. A shirt, a pair of jeans, shoes, whatever fit quickly into the bag. Melissa followed him, sobbing, begging, "Please, Daniel, we can fix this. Don't go. We can try again." But he shook his head. "Not tonight. Not after this." His voice was calm, but inside, he was splintering. He zipped the bag, walked past her, and headed for the door. She reached out, touched his arm, but he pulled away. Her touch, once comforting, now felt like fire. "I need air," he said. "I need space. I can't stay here right now." And with that, he left. The night swallowed him as he drove aimlessly, headlights cutting through the darkness. He didn't know where he was going, only that he couldn't stay under the same roof. Not after hearing the truth spoken aloud. Eventually, he found himself pulling into a cheap roadside motel. The neon sign buzzed faintly above him. Inside, the room smelled of stale smoke and forgotten guests. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, lost, broken, unsure of his next move. For the first time in his life, Daniel Harris had no map, no plan, no certainty, only pain, and the haunting question of whether he could ever climb out of it. The motel room was silent, save for the hum of an old air conditioner and the faint sound of cars rushing by on the highway outside. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, his suitcase half open on the floor. But his thoughts were nowhere near the four walls that surrounded him. His heart was back home with the two faces that gave his life meaning. He pulled out his phone and dialed. His son answered first, voice groggy from practice, but warm. "Hey, Dad? You okay?" Daniel forced his voice to steady. He told Michael he was fine, just tied up with some work out of town. They talked about football, about his upcoming tryouts. Michael sounded proud, excited. And Daniel did what fathers do. He encouraged. He listened. He promised he'd be back soon. Next, he called Emily. Her voice was lighter, curious. She asked if he'd be home for their Saturday breakfast, the ritual she looked forward to every week. Daniel swallowed hard. He told her he wasn't sure, but that he loved her more than anything. She giggled, said she loved him too. And then, before hanging up, she whispered, "I miss you, Daddy. Come home soon." The words lingered in the stale motel air long after the call ended. He stared at the screen until it went black, holding onto those 6 words as if they were a lifeline. Alone again. Memories came flooding back. Long hours at the office. The nights he came home, exhausted, but still read bedtime stories. The countless sacrifices he made so Melissa could stay comfortable, so the kids could thrive. He thought of anniversaries where he settled for a simple dinner instead of a grand gesture, because he believed stability meant more than show. He remembered the late-night talks, the quiet loyalty, the way he carried every burden without complaint. And now, all of it felt discarded, swept aside for cheap excitement with another man. Anger welled up, but not at Melissa this time. His thoughts turned to Victor, the name that had poisoned his marriage. The man who had stepped into his life uninvited and torn it apart without hesitation. While Daniel sat in this dingy motel, nursing the wound of betrayal, Victor was free, smiling, walking confidently into his office, believing he had conquered not only a woman's heart, but a man's family. Daniel clenched his fists. The thought of his children calling another man funny or charming was unbearable. Michael and Emily didn't know the truth yet. But if Victor continued to linger in Melissa's world, how long before he brushed shoulders with them? How long before his influence touched the very people Daniel had sworn to protect? He looked out the window at the empty parking lot, his reflection faint against the glass. Whatever happened with Melissa, whether forgiveness was possible or separation inevitable, one truth cut through the noise: the kids must come first. their safety, their stability, their innocence. That was his only non-negotiable, but another thought gnawed at him. Sharp and relentless. If he walked away quietly, if he let Victor go unchallenged, would that man continue living freely, unchecked? While Daniel's family lay in ruins, could he stomach the idea of Victor walking away without consequence? As though dismantling a marriage was nothing more than a game, the burden on Daniel's shoulders grew heavier. He knew he couldn't answer those questions tonight. Not yet. But the thought would not leave him. It curled in the corners of his mind, whispering with the persistence of a storm building on the horizon. He turned off the lamp and lay back. Phone clutched in his hand. His daughter's message still glowed in his memory. "I miss you, Daddy. Come home soon." He closed his eyes, knowing one thing for certain: whatever came next, the children would have their father, strong, present, unbroken. But as sleep crept in, one shadow loomed larger than the rest. Victor. Could he really walk free after destroying a family? Daniel knew rage could burn a man alive from the inside out. He had seen it happen in others, men who lashed out blindly, only to lose more than they had already lost. And he refused to be one of them. He wasn't going to scream in parking lots or throw punches in front of his children. Cheap revenge was beneath him. If Victor Holloway thought he could steal a wife, fracture a family, and keep strutting through life untouched, he was gravely mistaken. So Daniel made a call. On the second ring, a familiar voice answered. Mark Lawson, an old brother from the military. A man Daniel trusted with his life. Years had passed since they had shared a battlefield. But loyalty like that never fades. Mark now worked as a private investigator. His days spent unraveling secrets for clients who couldn't find the truth on their own. "Talk to me," Mark said. Daniel didn't explain everything. Not at first. Just the essentials: a man named Victor, a marriage in ruins, a need to know what kind of life this so-called executive was really living. Mark didn't hesitate. "Send me what you've got. We'll dig." In the days that followed, Daniel moved like a man with two lives. By day, he kept up appearances for his kids' school runs, meals, quiet conversations about homework. By night, when the house was still, he pored over records, cross-checking details, passing leads to Mark. What they uncovered was more than either expected. Victor's shiny image was built on rotten beams. Behind the tailored suits and expensive watch, there was a trail of deceit, flashy job titles. Yes, but the income didn't match the lifestyle. Properties bought under false names, shell companies masking transactions, contracts with vendors that didn't exist, offshore accounts in tax havens, hidden with the arrogance of a man who thought no one would ever look too closely. Piece by piece, Daniel gathered it all, not with fury, but with patience, cold, steady, deliberate. He printed copies, cataloged files, saved backups on drives. He hid away from curious eyes. Every page was dated, sourced, and summarized. Not a single detail was left to chance. Mark called one night, voice low, but edged with satisfaction. "Your boy Victor isn't just reckless, he's dirty. This isn't infidelity. This is fraud. Tax evasion. Theft on a level the feds would salivate over." Daniel listened, his hand tightening around the phone. For the first time since that night in the kitchen, he felt something close to control. He couldn't erase the betrayal carved into his chest, but he could make sure the man who mocked his marriage didn't walk away laughing. He leaned back, eyes fixed on the ceiling, and whispered to himself, almost like a vow, "If he thought he could take my family and walk away laughing, he was wrong." The plan was no longer about hurt feelings or broken vows. It was about justice. It was about showing his children that betrayal didn't have to breed bitterness, that strength was found in restraint and precision. While Melissa busied herself with excuses and Victor basked in stolen triumph, Daniel sharpened his blade silently, not the kind forged in iron, but the kind made of truth, patience, and evidence. And when the time came, he would strike not with chaos, but with finality. For now, he waited, building his case piece by piece. The hunter had chosen his ground, and Victor Holloway had no idea the trap was already closing. When the dossier was finally complete, dozens of pages, records, contracts, bank transfers, Daniel didn't sign his name. He didn't need credit. He wanted justice, not applause. In the quiet of his study, he sealed the files into an encrypted packet and sent them through a secure, anonymous channel to federal authorities. With one final click, he let go of the evidence. Knowing it was now in the hands of people who could act, the days that followed were some of the longest of his life. Outwardly, Daniel played the same role, making breakfast, driving Emily to school, talking with Michael about football practice. To his children, he was steady, present, unshaken. Inside, however, he lived with a storm of anticipation. Each morning, he checked headlines, scanned business sections, searched for a name that hadn't yet appeared: Victor Holloway. Weeks dragged on. Nothing came at first. The silence gnawed at him. Had the authorities dismissed it? Had Victor slipped through the cracks once again? Doubt crept in, whispering that maybe men like Victor always walked free. But Daniel pressed on, refusing to let uncertainty undo him. He reminded himself of the evidence, the detail, the truth that couldn't stay buried forever. And then one morning, the first hint appeared. A small article buried in the back of the financial section: local executive under scrutiny for questionable business practices. The piece was vague, speculative. No names, no charges, just whispers of corporate misconduct. But to Daniel, it was enough. It meant the wheels were turning. From that day on, he watched closely. Each week, the stories grew sharper. Reporters circling around the edges of something bigger. Anonymous sources spoke of irregular accounting, unregistered subsidiaries, phantom contracts. Daniel read every word like a man studying scripture. He didn't celebrate, he simply waited, silent and patient. And then came the call. Mark's voice was calm but electric. They raided his office this morning. Feds walked in with a warrant. Computers seized. Contracts confiscated. He's done. Daniel set the phone down and sat in silence, staring at nothing. For months, he had carried the weight of betrayal, anger, humiliation. And now, without lifting a fist, without shouting a word, justice had arrived. The next day, the headlines were unavoidable. Victor Holloway arrested for fraud and tax evasion. His mugshot filled the screen on the evening news. The details were damning: millions concealed, contracts falsified, years of deception. Prosecutors were already predicting a sentence that could stretch over a decade. Bail denied. Daniel watched the report alone, the flicker of the television reflecting in his eyes. To the world, Victor was just another corrupt executive caught in his own greed. But to Daniel, he was the man who tried to dismantle a family and who now sat behind bars, stripped of power, exposed for what he truly was. There was no gloating, no triumphant roar, just quiet relief. The kind of relief that seeps into a man's bones when he knows the scales have been balanced. Justice had not come from rage. It had come from patience, from discipline, from facts. And in that truth, Daniel found something stronger than revenge. He found peace. For the first time in months, he exhaled fully, as though a weight had finally lifted from his chest. Victor Holloway would face his judgment, and Daniel Harris, though scarred, stood tall, knowing he had chosen the higher road. Melissa's attempts came quickly after the arrest. Long messages filled with apologies, late-night calls that rang unanswered, envelopes left in the mailbox with her handwriting across the front. She begged to explain, begged for one more chance to talk, but Daniel never replied. Her words no longer carried weight. The silence he gave her was the same silence she had once given him when she turned to another man and left him standing alone in their marriage. Instead, Daniel poured his energy into what truly mattered: his children. Slowly, the house began to feel alive again. Saturday breakfasts returned. Emily flipping pancakes with too much flour on her cheeks. Michael telling football stories until everyone laughed. The routine was no longer hollow, it was theirs, rebuilt with honesty and care. Evenings on the porch became a new ritual. Conversations shifted from chores to dreams, from daily tasks to life lessons. Daniel noticed something in his kids' eyes: respect. They had seen him break, but they also saw him rise again without bitterness. One evening, Emily handed him a notebook from school. Inside was an essay she had written. Her words were simple but powerful. My dad climbed out of the deepest pit without bitterness. He showed me that strength isn't about fighting back, it's about standing tall when life tries to break you. He's my hero. Daniel read the lines twice, then closed the notebook, unable to hold back the emotion pressing in his chest. For months, he had questioned his worth as a husband, as a man, but in that moment, he understood something greater. His true legacy wasn't tied to a broken marriage. It was written in the lives of his children, not in vows betrayed, but in dignity preserved, not in anger unleashed, but in the quiet strength that carried them all forward. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel Harris felt whole again. Betrayal doesn't just break a man, it remakes him. Daniel Harris lost his marriage. Yes, but he gained something greater, the respect of his children and the peace of his own conscience. He proved that justice doesn't always come with raised voices or clenched fists. Sometimes it comes through patience, discipline, and the strength to walk away with dignity intact. Gentlemen, this story isn't just about one man. It's about a choice every man could face when trust is shattered. Do you answer betrayal with rage? Or do you rise above it and choose justice? If you were Daniel, what path would you have taken? Share your thoughts below. I want to hear your voice. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories of betrayal, resilience, and the quiet strength of men who refuse to be broken.